Alright, so today I'm going to try something a little different. I'm going to attempt to install um, Rails as a backend and have Breeze Next as a front end, which is actually a project from the Laravel community. So stay tuned. Alright, so first things first, I'm going to go ahead and install Rails. And this goes without saying, but I am not a Rails expert, so I do not recommend following this tutorial in any serious way. If you plan to use this in production, only do this if you know what you're doing. um, First things first, we need to get a new tab here, and I'm going to go and look up the Breeze Next GitHub. And we are going to just install the front end. So basically, I just need to clone this repository. And it looks like I'm actually already have this here. Alright, so I now have the Next Sanctum application and then also the Breeze backend, which is my Rails application. Um, so I'm going to change into the Next application first. I need to do a couple of tweaks here. Um, First thing, I'd like to change some of these scripts here. First thing I want to add is a port. So I'd like to use 8080. Next uses port 3000 by default, which is also happens to be what Rails uses. So we're going to use 8080 just to not have any conflicts there. And then I think that's it for that. Uh, the other thing is we need to copy the environment. And by default, this uses um, 8000, which is Laravel's backend, but we want 3000. All right. Now I can run npm install and npm run dev. And with any luck, if we go to localhost 8080, we have our Next.js Laravel Breeze application, which is kind of weird, but it is what it is. All right. So let's get into the meat here. I'm going to use RubyMine just because I have it. And let's open up the Breeze backend here. All right. First things first, clean up our Git here. And good to go. So I have a list here of things we need to do. We need to install bcrypt, factory.rails, and faker. I'm sure there's a better way of doing this, but I'm going to do it the way that I know how. And let's see, bundle add factory.rails. Actually, I'm in the wrong directory, aren't I? Yes. Okay. Bundle add faker. And then just gonna run bundle in case there's anything else hanging out. Should be good. All right. So at this point, I'm going to, All right, install Breeze next. I need to add and see my users. So we'll say Rails G. I would like to say model. And basically, I'm just doing a string email and then the password digest, which should all be very familiar. You might be wondering why I'm not using device. And that is because um, device doesn't device uses normal CSRF protection, and we're going to build our own, which is probably a terrible idea in an actual production environment, but for us, it's the only way we're going to get this to work. So treat this as a fun little activity, not as something that you're actually going to use. All right, so we're going to have secure password. We'll do that one, this one. Thank you, GitHub Copilot. Let's see, validates name. That's another one. All right, so that's our user model. I feel like we need some seeded data here. I should have a factory in here. So I'm just going to use my name, james@example.com, and then my super secret password. If I could spell password. I'm a coder, guys. All right, factory, and we're going to do a random user. And that all looks pretty good. So then in the seeder, what we're going to do is create the default user, and then also some random users. And I think with any luck, this should all work. Okay. And we should have this. Should be users table, and here's our users. Sorry that everything's super small here. But you can see that our password is nicely hashed, as you would expect. So good, we did that part. Now we need to disable CSRF protection. And that, I believe... Alright, I had to do a little bit of digging there to figure out how to disable CSRF site-wide. So essentially all you need to do is go under the config application.rb and paste in this thing, and that will disable the default CSRF. We are going to build our own. Okay. Next, we need to create a decrypt function on the application controller, which is down here. I'm just going to copy and paste it because it's a little bit crazy. I'll explain it here in a sec. We're going to make it a private method. So basically what this is going to do, the idea behind Breeze Next is that on the Rails server, we're going to create a CSRF token we're going to encrypt it and then pass it to the user. Um, then the user will pass it back to the server in a header, and we're going to use this function to decrypt the cookie, and then we're going to compare the decrypted cookie with the um, actually, we're going to compare the decrypted header with the decrypted cookie, if that makes any sense. Um, so ultimately, the decryption is something that we can only do on this machine, and uh, so tampering with it on the client side isn't going to work out, um, at least in theory. Um, so that's the decryption one. Then we need to um, use a secure comparison. So we need to actually create the endpoint. So I'm going to create a session controller. Sessions controller, and I'm actually going to call it CSRF. It's not following the normal naming conventions, but I'm not really a Rails developer, so I can do what I want. All right, and then what I'm going to do here is actually have this pasted as a snippet, I think. Yes. So I'm just going to paste this in here. And essentially, we're just going to make an encrypted cookie with this name. And it's just a secure random hex. And then we're going to set that on the user's computer. And then on the client side, Axios is going to take this encrypted cookie and pass it back in a header called XSRF token. And then we're going to read that, decrypt it, and then compare it. I think I already said that, but it's a little confusing. So hopefully you guys are following. I need to create a route for this, and it's going to be get, I believe it is sanctum CSRF cookie. Okay, and that's just a GET request. All right, so far so good. I need cores. Did I install cores? I don't think I did. So let's do bundle add rack cores. Uh, what's the name of that? Rack, is it just rack cores? Yeah. Okay. So now we need to um, I'm actually going to switch over to this other um, branch that I have and just copy this in here. So we need to create an initializer, and it can be just a Ruby file, uh, maybe. I want to call it cores. I'm going to paste in this stuff here. And so essentially this is allowing everything from the localhost 8000, and it's also requiring credentials, which is what we need. Okay. cores is necessary or none of this is going to work. All right, next step. We already did that. We need to create a login endpoint. So I believe we could do that here. We'll just make it, we'll make it create and then say user. Actually, this is perfect. Thank you again to GitHub Copilot for doing everything for me. We do have this user params, which I'm going to have to define down here. So let's do private. I'll say def user params, email, password. That's good enough for now. That might be all I need actually. Maybe session. Excuse me. All right, and then I think that's it. And then we also need to create a CSRF check. Actually, let's go ahead and do the destroy endpoint also. Now this is going to be our logout, essentially. So let me talk through this a little bit. So it's going to find the user by the ID, in this case the email. It's going to attempt to authenticate using the password, and then set the session. Very simple, normal login type flow. And I believe that's all we need for that. Log out just resets the session and then sets that to nil. In fact, I think, yes. So I'm going to replace this with my snippet here because this has a little something that's kind of nifty. So it's recommended that you reset the session every time you log in or log out. And in my case, we actually don't need this token, but if you want to keep any of the session values, you need to make sure that you save them and then reapply them to the session here. We don't have anything else except for user ID at the moment, but it's a good kind of practice to make sure you're resetting when you create the user. Okay. So we created the login endpoint. Let's actually make these in the routes file. So I'm going to do login. And this is not login, it is create. This should actually be post. And then post log out to destroy. And that should be good. And then I also want to do a get to API user. This will be user show. We don't have that yet, but we're going to make it here in a second. We'll say Rails G controller users show. And then in here, let's see. That looks pretty good. User find by JSON. Yep. Only difference is that I don't want to do any kind of other response. So I'm just going to render JSON. And get rid of that. There we go. Find by ID, session user ID. Okay. So that's going to return the user directly. And that'll be at this endpoint. And this is something that next, Breeze Next is looking for. All right, what else am I needing to do here? I feel like I'm missing a couple of steps. Ah, yes. We need to check the CSRF. We haven't actually done that yet. So in application controller, I'm going to create another method called check CSRF. And this does a couple of unlesses. I'm sure you could probably combine these, but my brain is too fried right now to do that. So feel free to fix my code here. But essentially, this says if it's not a GET request, then we're going to use this secure compare to check the cookies encrypted XSRF token against the decrypt cookies request headers XSRF token. So this is just basically a make sure that they compare. So unless they don't compare, um, it won't send this. So in other words, if this compares, then it's fine. Just keep going. If it doesn't compare, then it does the CSRF token mismatch and gives a status of unprocessable entity. So we're going to say before action, check CSRF. And that will basically apply CSRF protection to our entire site. Okay. So I think we're almost ready to give this a shot. So let's fire up a Rails server and give it a whirl here. What do you think are the odds that this is going to work the first time? I don't have a high confidence level here. All right, so James at example.com, and we're going to give it password. Okay, so we got an error. Let's see what we have here. Well, let's do it again here. All right, so CSRF cookie is giving me a CORS error. And that might be response. Let's see. Did I use the correct? Did I set my CORS up correctly? Yes. So that's 8,000. I think I set it to 8080. So you probably noticed that, and I did not. So restart this, and let's refresh. Okay, what do we got now? Oh, still getting a CORS error. Um, so it's making a request to this Sanctum CSRF cookie, which is coming here, encrypting that, and it should just send it back, but it's not because of CORS. Um, Interesting. All right, so I'm going to refresh this and restart Rails. Okay, so we're getting a 500 now instead of a CSRF error. So I did get the no content and I got the cookie, so that's good. Um, Now we are getting a undefined local variable session params. Do I have something? I must have, I named it something wrong, didn't I? Yeah, I named it user params. Weird. Okay, try it again. And we're in. Um, for some reason, this always surprises me every time I do it, even though it all makes sense that it would work. Um, so I'm actually successfully able to um, hit these endpoints uh, with CSRF protection. And I'm using a Rails backend. Pretty cool. So anyway, like I said before, I don't recommend this necessarily, but I thought it was a pretty fun little activity. It kind of taught me some different things about Rails, and I hope you enjoy. I'll try to push this code up so that I can put it as an example also. So anyway, that's it.